am recording, and I'm definitely going to post this video that is a refresher of coding in the Godot game engine. So we were just talking about these basic functions, right? We have our process function and our ready function, and I was asking folks if anyone is familiar with how to create functions themselves. Does anyone remember how to do that? Any guesses? Yeah. Funk, right? So funky. Yeah. Sorry.
Whatever you want after that.
You want? Yeah, you can write literally whatever you want.
True.
And then whatever you want to have happen just happens down here, right? So I'm going to say print out. We did it. And then how do we call this function? How do we make it happen in code?
Whatever you want in the process.
Yeah, or wherever you want to execute it from. So if I want to execute it from the process function, I can do that. But that means it's going to happen every single God. These things are so funny. Okay, if you call it from the process function, right, it's going to happen from here. It's going to happen, or it's going to happen inside the process function, so it's going to happen every single time. So now when we run this, we're going to get a lot of affirmations. We did it, 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 right? What's also fun, though, about functions, why would we use a function? What's the point of making our own functions?
To streamline your process so you don't have to write code so many times.
Yeah, if you're doing something a bunch, like let's say you are, I don't know, let's say we want to like move, let's make a function called move towards, oh, that is already a function. So I'll just make a new function called move x towards, and I'll give it a number, so you can pass in numbers, right? You can pass in arguments. So I'll say amount, and this can also be called whatever you want. This can just be a word, and then I'll say like this function is going to change the position of our object on the x-axis by this amount. So you can do that by saying position dot x plus equals amount. And so now what you can do is we could say, like in our process function, we could say move x towards, and we can give it an amount, right? And this is going to happen every single frame. And so now we'll see, there it goes, whee, right? And you can do all sorts of stuff. Like you could make it bounce with this, because you can just change the amount, right? We could make it go like back and forth. Like if we move in a positive direction and then a negative direction, this might be too fast actually. Let's see. Yeah, you can't even really see what's happening. Maybe like I don't know, let's make it big. This will sort of look a little weird, but it'll look kind of like we're going to go to the left, but we'll go to the left not as fast. I'm doing a bad job of showing this off, but does everybody understand like how this function, we can use this function multiple times? What's also nice about functions is you can call them from this script, but you can also call them from other scripts by referencing the node. Okay, so let's look at that, right? So let's say I make a new script on this node 3D. And now we can do stuff here, but we can also like do things to any of the children of the node that we're currently in. So does anybody remember how we like reference one of these children nodes? You can just drag it? Yeah. So you can just drag it and drop it. And it'll do this $sign. We do $sign and then the node name. Right? And this is the path. This is the path of the child node. So if, for instance, we had a node below this other node, node 3D, I'll call it child, So if we wanted to like reference this child, we would do the name of this node. Here, we'll just do $, and then we'll say CSG, and then you'll see right here, right there's the name of the child. And so this is just kind of like a file path, but it's the path of the node, yeah? And so we can do any of the, by sort of referencing the name of it, we can do any of the built-in functions that this node has. So for instance, we can make it invisible by doing that, by calling the hide function. And that'll turn off the fucking thing. It's getting worse. I feel like it's getting worse. So now you'll see that we made the node invisible, right? Because we reached in there and we called its hide function. But we can also call the function that we just made. So we can also call our move x towards, and then I'll say like 1. And then now it should move it over a little bit, right? It's hard to see, so let's make it bigger. Let's say like 4. What is this command again? Command B. Command B? No? Okay. And it's moved it over, right? So we can kind of reach into nodes and do things to them by calling functions, and we can make those functions whatever we want. We can also change any variables that we've created in the same way. So like, let's say we have like a like size variable. And we can make a like a change size function. And then we can say scale equals, and scale is a vector 3, so we're gonna do we're gonna make a vector 3, and then we're gonna say size comma size comma size. And what we can do is we can when we in the ready function, we can call this function to update the size. Maybe I'll call this function actually update size. Update size. That's a little bit more accurate. So I'll say update size. And we can also even export this variable, right? Export to make it accessible via the editor. So now, if I click on the CSG thing, we have this size property over here, which I can make bigger. And when I run the code, you'll see that it's, should be bigger, right? It's pretty big now. And I can even, I can access both of those from this script up here too, right? I can sort of say CSG dot size equals 0.1, and then I can say CSG, and then I can say update size. And you'll notice that none of my functions are getting automatically loaded in, right? So I have to type them all out by hand, which can be both annoying and can cause you problems if you misspell things, right? So an easy way to get around that is if you sort of drag and hold Control and then drop. Nope, I always get this wrong on Mac. Drag and Command and drop. It gives you this special little syntax. We use onReady, and then we create a variable, and then we reference the $sign thing. That allows us to then just do this. We can just use this variable name, CSG sphere, and then when we hit period, you'll see that we have all of the proper properties and functions, including the ones that we made. So we have our size equals 0.1, and then we can even say CSG dot update size, and there's our function, right? So that's like a little bit easier, but it's basically the same thing as doing the $sign. But the real point here is that, right, we can edit our variables and call an object's function from another script somewhere else in our code. So now if we run it, it should be smaller again because we updated it. Cool? I am actually finding it a little bright, so do you mind dropping that shade, actually?
Sure.
Thank you so much. Any other questions about code or how code works? Things we're unclear about? That's great. Thank you. Yeah.
How do you make say you had a machine
Uh-huh.
you wanted to be able to simply interact with one of the buttons on the machine.
Uh-huh.
How do you kind of do like a 3D?
Like a button press, kind of?
Yeah. Without any animations, but just like
Well, that's also an animation because, Dishti, didn't you ask about animation player as well? Yeah, let's make a button that we can press real quick. The way that I would go about doing that, just to prototype it, is first let's make a scene called button. So let's make a new scene. It'll be a 3D scene. I'll rename it button. And then I will add a, I'll add two children nodes. I think I'll add a CSG, maybe cylinder. And then I'll also add a torus. CSG shapes are great for this, exactly this type of thing, for prototyping simple interactions, right? If you really want to get fancy, you might want to actually model this in modeling software, but this is a simple enough way. So I'll give this 32 sides. I'll give this 32 sides. I'll make it smaller. And taller. And I'll make this kind of like, I don't know, that looks sort of buttony. And I'll shrink it to there. Great. And I'll make it red. Because buttons have to be red. Or green, it's true. I'll make it right in the middle. So, brown. So here's our button. Here's our nice, weird little brown button. In order to make an animation on nodes, the easiest way to do that is to use this thing called the animation player. So you just add this node called the animation player, and then it opens up this tab down here, which looks blank when you don't have any animations. So first you want to create an animation by clicking on animation, and then new. And I'll call this pressed. And I'll change the length of the animation to 3 seconds, and you'll see that this gray area kind of stretches out. What I can do now is, what you can notice now is that over here, all of the properties in the nodes have these little keys next to them, and these are keyframes, right? And if you've used anything like After Effects or any other sort of like editing program, keyframes should be fairly familiar to you. I'm going to go down to the transform property, and I'm going to keyframe the initial starting position. And the first time you do it, it's going to ask you to create a track, and that's fine. Then I'm going to scroll the playhead down to about halfway. And I'm going to adjust the button. Boop. And I've just adjusted the position, so now I'm going to add a keyframe for that. And then I'm just going to take this keyframe and duplicate it and bring it, what? Oh no, wait, undo. I'm going to move the playhead to the end and try duplicating it. And so now I think I should have this So I think when I duplicated it, I accidentally changed it. So I'm just going to change this middle keyframe value to whatever it is right now. I'm going to find it out by clicking on it, -3. I'll say -0.3. So I'm going to go back to the animation player, click on this keyframe, and change this to -0.3. There we go. Now we have this little play animation. Boop. Pretty cute. Then, you know, how you trigger this animation is sort of up to you, right? You can, you know, if we just sort of save this scene as button, and go to our main scene, right, and we add in our button. So I did Command-Shift-A to instantiate this scene, right? You can do all sorts of stuff. So if it's just in the root, for instance, I can open up this main script, and in the process function, I can just look for the space button to be pressed. So I can say if nope, sorry. What's the best way to do that again? I'll create a new function called input func. This is a built-in function. So you use the little underscore, and then we say input event, and then if event is input event dot is, no, wait a minute. If input event dot oh my god, my brain. Let's do a mouse press. If the event is the input event mouse button, colon, let's just print out click for now. So now this should print out click every time we press or release the mouse button. So if we want to get even more specific, we can say print event. So we have this kind of gives you all the details about the input event, right? So we see the mouse button. So we can say, I'll just do a simple thing. I'll say if input event, I'll say if pressed equals true, right? Because we see that every time we press down, we get this pressed event. So if input event is mouse button, if event dot pressed, then I will go and play this animation. So I'll go and drop in our button. And in order to play our animation, I'm going to go back into our button and add a little script to it. I'm going to create a function called press. And in press, we're just going to call our animation player. We're going to say dot play the press animation. I'll just test that real quick by calling this press function at the start of the button scene. So now when we run our project, right, because our button scene is instantiated inside the main scene, when it gets loaded with the ready function, we should call this press function, which should play this animation called press. So in theory, when we start the project, our button should get pressed. Whee! And so now, back in the main scene, I'll say, so if we click and if we're pressing down, then I'll say button.press. And so now when we run the code, it should press automatically. And then when we click, it should also press it. But this isn't really like that great because this is just clicking everywhere, right? You could be in a whole different part of your level and click, and this wouldn't really wouldn't do it. So there's a couple different ways to take care of that, and you kind of have to think about how are you interacting. Like, do you want to actually be able to click on the button? Do you want to walk up to the button and press a keyboard button? Do you want to touch it with VR? Like, what's the type of, how do we want to actually press this button?
It would be like when the character body gets within like
an area.
Yeah, like close to the machine.
Yeah.
Then like UI pops up that says like press E to.
Yeah. Yeah, we can do that.
And,
yeah, what do you got? So we heard a couple things there, right? We have a character body that's moving around, and we have UI that we can press and stuff, right? Let's do the simplest version possible. Let's go ahead and say like, well, firstly, if we want to detect when something is near something else, does anybody remember what node we want to use?
Collision something?
So collision shapes are good for detecting if we like actually hit something. But there's this really wonderful node called Area.
Oh.
We can use the Area 3D node. And the Area 3D wants, as a child, a collision shape. So we're going to go ahead and add a collision shape, shape 3D, and the shape wants to get defined. So I'll make a box shape. And I'll go ahead and make this nice and big. So I'll make a nice big box. And I actually don't like how this box is going. Yeah, I'll just change these numbers, 5, 5, and 5. Maybe that's big enough, and I'll also put this like higher up. So this is going to be our area, and when something enters this area 3D is going to emit a signal. Okay, it has all of these signals that it knows how to emit when different things trigger it. So when an area enters it, when a body enters it, all this sort of stuff. What I'll do is I'll just make a quick level. So I'm going to go back to our node 3D. I'll call this main. And let's just add a level, right? So I'm going to add a floor. CSG box. I'll make it nice and big. 10 and 10. I'll bring it down a little bit. I'm going to turn on collisions so that I don't fall through it. So you can hit collisions to use collisions. Then I'm going to add a very basic character. So I'll add a character body. Right? Character bodies are great for making any sort of like player-controlled characters or AIs. And the character body has a warning, which is that it wants a collision shape, right? So let's give it a collision shape 3D. And the collision shape wants a shape. I'm going to give it this capsule shape. You can't really see anything right now, but you can kind of tell that we have this capsule guy right here. But let's add a mesh to also see our character. Mesh instance 3D. And then I will make a capsule mesh. So now we have our little character guy. I'm going to take our character body and move it up and over. I'm also going to take the camera and make it a child of the character body so that it can kind of follow the character around a little bit. I'll put it like up here. Actually, I'll put it back here so we can kind of see what's going on. That's not very helpful. I'm going to hit Command 2 to split the viewport in two, and then have one look through the camera so that way I can kind of see even better. Okay, that's good. And then finally, I'm going to go onto the character body, right-click, and click Attach Script. And what's nice about the character body is it has a pretty decent built-in template for character movement, just for testing stuff out. So I'm just going to create. And we'll see we have this template which has detects, up, down, left, and right movement and jumping. And so if I just hit play now, I have this character who I can move around with the arrow keys, okay? So this is part of it, which is nice. But now we need to actually do our sort of triggering, right? We need to actually trigger our button pressing stuff. So in order to do that, we have to go back to our button, and we want to use this Area 3D node, right? And does anybody have a guess as to what signal we might want to use? Area entered is when another area enters the area, which is kind of confusing. Well, we actually want a body entered because we're going to use our character body. So I'm going to say I'm going to use body entered, and I'm going to connect it to the button. And there's like a couple of different ways to do the UI stuff. I'll come back to the UI in a minute, but just to first make it possible to press the button, let's go ahead and make a new variable called like can be pressed, and I'll make it false. And when the body enters this area, I'm going to make it true. So can be pressed is true. And then I also want to make it false when the body exits this area. So I'm going to go ahead and do body exited, connect, and then I'll make can be pressed false. And there's like a lot of different ways to do this, right? And this is just the way that I'm kind of thinking through right now. So there's probably more elegant ways to do this. But what we can do now is, right, when we call our press function, we can check to see if it can be pressed before we actually do the pressing animation. So now we can just say if can be pressed. And then if it can be pressed, then we will call this press animation. So now that actually might be good enough because I think we still have the clicking pressing. Yeah, so let's go ahead and see. So right, currently we are not inside the area, and you'll notice that it didn't get pressed even though we called that press function. Because our character isn't near it, we actually can't press it. But now if I move near it and I'm inside the area and I click, it can be pressed, right? But now if I leave the area and I click, it can't be pressed. And you can actually see, it's helpful sometimes to turn on collision shapes so you can see what's going on. So now we can see here's the area and here's my little collision shape. And when I'm inside of this area, it can be clicked. But when I'm outside of it, it cannot be clicked. There's our tiny sphere too. The final thing about how to make UI appear is, again, there's a couple different ways to do it. How I would do it, if you really want to use this button a bunch, you're going to want to think about how to make it kind of reusable. So it's nice to have like a, well, actually, yeah, it's nice to sort of be able to operate on, to kind of think about it a little bit modularly. So we have this, what we can do is we can go back to our node and we can have our character scene. You can also have a, like, I'll make a label 3D. Well, actually, there's a couple different ways. Maybe it's easier to actually just do it on the button. You can either have the label sort of hover in front, follow the character around, or you can have the label sort of hovering over the button. Maybe it's even easier to just have it on the button. For instance, I'll just make a label here, label 3D, and I'll make some text that says press or click to press. It's a little bit weird as a text, but that's fine. There's this really handy thing you can do with 3D sprites called billboarding. Billboarding is where it always faces the camera, no matter wherever the camera is. So in order to turn that on, you just go to, I think it's in geometry or visibility. Bill. Flags. It's in flags because, you know, everything makes sense. It's inside flags, and you want to turn on enabled. And then now you'll see that whenever we turn, the text is always facing the camera, which is a really nice little thing to have. And this text by default doesn't look great, but there's a lot of like tricks you can do to make this text look better. For instance, well, I'm not going to get into that now, but just know that you can change the font and make it look high res and stuff. But by default, it just sort of looks kind of crappy. So now I think what I'll do is if the button can be pressed, like when we, yeah, I guess when the body enters it, let's just show this label. So I'll just do label.3d.show. And then I'll do label.3d hide. And now, oh, and we probably want to have it invisible by default because we're not in the area. I said we want it to be invisible by default. I guess I'm already in the area. Maybe I start off in the area. It might also be colliding with the floor. The floor itself might be considered a body. But for the starters, that works okay, right? And what's really nice, the coolest thing about doing things in scenes, about making scenes, is that they are super reusable, right? So like, for instance, I just have this one button scene now, but I can make 20 of them, right? I can make this floor really big, and I can just duplicate this button. And look, there's another button, right? And they're each individually pressable. So now, because all the logic and all the code sort of goes with it, right? So, hold on, let me just go turn them all off. I think it is colliding with the floor. As a matter of fact, what I'll do, I'll show you another benefit of scenes, right? I'll just change the base scene itself, and it should fix the whole thing. So I'll take this collision shape and make it smaller. Oh my God, collision shape, smaller. There we go, save that, run it again. And now, right, we're not colliding with the floor, so it's not spawning and turning on the label. And now I can go into this one, you'll see, right, we go into this one and this one's clickable, but these other ones aren't. But now if we go down into here, this one is clickable. This one is clickable. Hello? What did I do? So, does anybody have a guess as to why only this one is clickable? It's because I believe we hard-coded it. I think we hard-coded specifically, yeah, click this particular button, right? So that's a roundabout way. You could do it that way, but what's maybe an easier thing to do is to say, like, you know, what you really want to do actually is to have this input code in your character body. So let's take this out here. Let's go back to our character body. And I'll show you why we want to have it in our character body, because we can do some kind of jujitsu type stuff. So I'll make this code in our character body. It still works, right, because it's still a node in the scene. So I'm going to hit play now. We'll just verify that it's all still working. Nope, it's not. That's why we check. But this is part of the problem, right? We want to actually we want to press the button, and we want to be able to press any button, not just the one button that we run into. So what we can do is we can make a new variable called object to press, and we can make it equal to nothing when we start off. And then we can say if the event is pressed and there is an object to press, then instead of saying button.press, we can just say object.press. So this is kind of good, right? We're calling this imaginary function on this thing that's nothing right now. So that's maybe seems even more broken than before, but what we can do is if we're inside of our button script, right, whenever we press the button, you'll notice that we have this body node, this body argument. This body argument is whatever body enters the area 3D, which is just the character body, right? And as we saw earlier, we can set any properties of nodes through code. So we can say body, and this body will have this can be pressed property. Or sorry, no, this body will have a, whatever we just called it, object to press property. So we'll say body.object to press equals self, me, right? Equals me, the button. So press me, the button. And so by assigning this property, we sort of say, hey, when we enter the area, right, the button says, hey, I'm the object who you're close enough to press, so remember that. And so then when we go and do the press action, we go and try and press that specific button. Does that make sense? It's a little wacky, but what it does is it allows you to do this.
Yeah, the
Area 3D is the node to go with. So now we can press this button, but now if we get to this button, we can press this button. Any questions on that? That's a pretty complicated little trick we just did.
It's kind of intuitive, because there's the button aspect of it, and then there's just the character aspect of it.
You just want to think about kind of passing things around from node to node, and signals kind of help you pass things around. Does anybody else have questions on how this particular little bit of trickery worked? It's okay. It's okay to ask if none of it makes sense. Speak now, because I can either spend another hour talking about this, or we can just move on.
I mean, I can only speak for myself. I think it just helps me to do it myself later. But
Yeah,
watching
totally.
it, I get what you did and it makes sense, but
Okay.
we'll see what happens.
Yeah, the trickiest part to remember is particularly if you're making things with scenes, right? Let's say you make a bunch of buttons you want to press or things you want to pick up. You want to use things like Area 3D, and you want to pass around this body argument is whatever body enters the Area 3D. So if I were to print this out, we would see the name of the character, right? We would see, right, there it is, the character body .3D, and we can access any of its properties, right? So if we said, if our character body had a name, name is a built-in thing, but I'll say a first name. We could say hey, what is the first name of this node? We could print out the body.first name. And you'll see there's my first name getting printed out, right? So it's just the same as that, except what we're doing is instead of accessing this property, we're assigning this property, and we're assigning this property, we're saying, we're passing the name of the area that got, the button that got triggered into it, right? So if we print out this, we'll print out now the body dot, object to press. And so, right, this is this particular button, but if we go over here, it's this particular button. And you'll see that they're two different buttons, right? There's this button and this one. And so by passing that reference to the character, then inside of our character code, when we go to press the button, we're getting the button that we've sort of stored in as a variable, and we're saying, okay, we'll press that one. So that's how that works. That takes us to 420. Nice. Any other sort of like refreshers or questions you guys have about how code works or functions or different nodes, things you're a little unsure about? Let's do this. Why don't we take an early break? Let's break until 4:32. When we come back, I'll show you how to export games to itch, and then we'll do some fun stuff with terrain. And how are people's brains? Is this too technical? A little bit?
It's on the line.
On the line? Okay, we'll try and keep it lighter from here on out. Okay, see you at 4:32. Hey! Hi. Okay.
I'm trying to upload files to
Okay.
GitHub.
Yeah.
But it says
Yeah, sure does.
it's not a long name file.
Mhm.
But I deleted that file. But we still have
So we have assets. Yeah, okay. Let's do this. We don't need this whole folder. We can ignore the Android build folder. So what you can do is go to GitHub and then go to repository settings. Give me one moment while I just check this specific setting. One moment. That's sort of annoying. Let's try doing this. Let's go to ignored files, and then you can go ahead and add a new line. Yeah, if you want to. Yeah, so it just wants to look like this. I think it is. Let me just see which ones in particular go. Let's do. No, this is fine.
Okay.
I think. xrpl/android/builds. That's okay. I think it's that. I don't know if it's entirely true. Android/build with a D. Let's see if I can do it. Let's try that. Do you want to try committing?
test list.
Yeah, that's it. Nice. And then commit to main. This might not fix it, but I hope it will.
If I haven't come back in, is
You should be on the internet, and then it might also just take a minute if there's a lot of files and stuff.
Did you start recently?
I thought I had 1,000.
Okay, that's
Oh, no, it's okay.
yeah. That's so. What we did is we just said. So if you had a whole bunch of files and it said only 300, what we did is this whole folder has a bunch of files in it for a bunch of stuff that you don't really need.
Yeah.
This is specifically for like building it onto an Android headset. So what we said when we changed this setting is just ignore this whole folder. Don't worry about putting that on GitHub because we can always. That's not a necessary folder to the project. And that folder had all the long file names in it. So now I think if you click push to origin, it should be good.
No internet.
No internet. Okay. I'm gonna actually run to the restroom, but I'll come back and.
Thank you.
No problem.
Oh, the coffee shop? Yeah. Okay. So if you were in a coffee shop, you'll always visit no matter what. Beans? Oh. What I missed was the espresso margarita. No, it's. I know. I know. But I think I just left that second. No. So I worked at like local cafes. I worked at E&B. Yeah. Fort Lee. Yeah. For Bedford. We wanted it all. Like over there.
I'm still recording. Shoot.